Hello, I'm Michael Van Vliet, the Grants Team Leader at City of Yarra, and I'm here to talk to you about our annual Grants program for 2021. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people as the traditional owners of the land, and also acknowledge the significant contributions by the Torres Strait Islanders and Aboriginal people to life in Yarra, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. Okay, so the information session, the information we're going to give you is basically when can you apply, why do we provide these grants, who's eligible for the grants, what are some of the different funding categories, how to apply, and some tips for writing your application. So the applications open on Thursday the 15th of October. And they close on Sunday, the 29th of November at 11:59 p.m. So try to get your application in before then. The decisions will be announced hopefully in mid-January 2021 and grants paid from January into February and projects to commence in February and end by February 2022, a year later. So why do we provide these grants? We provide them to provide financial support to strengthen the community and promote health and well-being. The grants aim to address the social needs of the community along a range of ideas, including arts and culture, environment, community development, sport, recreation, youth, and families. Are you eligible for the grant? Well, grants are generally given to not-for-profit community organisations who are incorporated. There are some exceptions. Groups can be auspiced if they're not incorporated themselves, and individuals and businesses can apply under the arts and culture category. It's important to read the guidelines for the full list of eligibility criteria. So here are our main grant categories. This year there are 6 categories. There's a community development category, which includes strengthening support, celebrations and social enterprise. There's climate action, family, youth and children's, sports and recreation, arts and culture, and the community housing program. I'll talk about each of these individually. The funding figures for this year are the grant scheme with over $1 million for the first time. So in 2021, for the annual grants, we'll have $370,000 to community development, $270,000 to arts and culture, $163,000 to family, youth and children, $80,000 to climate change, $56,000 to sport and recreation, and $53,500 to community housing, totaling in $1.004 million. Just going back a bit to further extrapolate about what the community strengthening and the difference between community sport and community strengthening. Our community strengthening is basically for smaller organisations who might be your local seniors group or something of that nature who meet once a week when possible, and they can receive up to 4,000, whereas the community support grants are more aimed at those not-for-profit organisations that might run a program or social services. So that's more what they're aimed at. The community celebration grants are obviously, for it might be a national day or a New Year's celebration or a street party of something of that nature. It might be the closing of a road to have a school fete. It could be anything of that sort of in that sort of area. There's also the social enterprise grants, which are for organisations or businesses that describe themselves as social enterprise that are putting back into the community, and it's to support their efforts. The climate action grants are recalibrated sustainability grants, and basically they seek to support initiatives that accelerate community-led climate action at a local level. So the stream places a priority on funding projects that mobilise the community and support the vulnerable. They build strong social connections and present models to reduce carbon emissions, support local food systems, care for local natural environments, avoid and reduce waste, and promote conscious consumption, and foster sustainable transport. There are two tiers of funding, one up to $5,000 for smaller projects and up to $10,000 for more sustainable long-term projects. The Family, Youth and Children stream is designed to enhance the health and well-being of families, children and young people from all backgrounds who live, work and study and visit Yarra and build their capacity to actively participate. There are two subcategories, family and early years, which is basically for from birth to about 12 years old, and then the youth and middle age category, which is from 12 to 25 or so. The maximum grant in each category is $10,000. The sports and recreation grants seek to support a wide range of accessible recreation, sport and physical activities opportunities, basically for sporting clubs. Yarra obviously has a lot of sporting clubs in the neighbourhood, and we're basically wanting to support these clubs either through participation initiatives, so getting people who aren't into sport back into sport. It might be older people or girls or people from CAL backgrounds. Also, sport and recreation equipment and coach and volunteer training and education to skill up these clubs. The Arts and Culture stream supports the creation of presentation of arts and cultural programs, activities and works to promote Yarra as a creative place. Obviously, there's a lot of art galleries, a lot of artists working and living in Yarra, and there are three subcategories of grants. There's the Arts Development Grant, which is up to 70,000. There's Festival and Events, which is a total funding pool of 135,000. Some of this might be moved around though if there's not that many events happening next year because of COVID. Some of that money might be put into the arts development stream. There's also a community arts subcategory with a total funding pool of 50,000. You can see more details about those in the guidelines about what they actually are describing. The community housing stream is about promoting initiatives to help sustain tenancies and build more cohesive and resilient communities in Yarra, and to address social issues around homelessness and community housing. The maximum grant is $50,000, and the eligible projects include things that might address the impacts of complex multiple issues on vulnerable tenants, sustain tenancies of low-income households at risk of homelessness, to explore development of packages that support new community housing, and explore partnerships that increase resilience and connectedness of community housing tenants. Aside from the annual grants, there's also the small project grants which are now open. Grants up to $1,000 are available through our website. And these grants are designed for discrete projects or events that arise unexpectedly outside the timelines of the annual grants. There are two streams of grants, community development and arts and culture. You can only apply for one of these per year, and the outcome usually takes around 3 to 5 weeks. And there's $75,000 budgeted for these grants. Usually the grants run out by about February or March and then reopen in July each year. There's also the Investing in Community grant available at the moment, so it's a good idea to head over to our website where you can apply for the grants and see what else is available. The Investing in Community grants are larger grants for larger projects, I guess, that run over 3 years, and the grant's up to $50,000. So they're only available once every 3 years, so it's a good idea. You may apply for an annual grant as well as a investing in community grant as well. And when you come to have a look at the guidelines, especially for the different projects in annual grants, it's a good idea to have a look at the form and see the links to the grants officer. So there'll be a phone number listed to the grants officer about your relative funding streams, so it'll be linked to whichever grant you're applying for, and have a chat to them about your project before you get started. So in that way, you can maybe iron out any problems you might have with the application, or see whether it's relevant to that stream in the first place and whether it's something that would likely to be funded, so you don't waste your time beforehand before going to all the trouble of putting in an application. Also, you might get some other ideas about projects that have been before, or other partnerships or groups you can link up with to do your project. So here's what the application form itself looks like. Obviously, there's a few pages. You can see the form navigation on the right. There's about 15 pages to fill out. So starting with the applicant details, the funding categories, etc. So be prepared. It's also always good to have some documents on hand that you need. You need to provide a financial statement with your application if you're a community organisation or not-for-profit. You need to keep your budget realistic. So have a look, get some quotes if you're buying equipment or getting services. Don't just make up a figure, or don't undersell yourself, or don't overquote it. Also, try to avoid jargon. Use plain English in your application, because obviously the assessors have lots to read, and the simpler it is and the plainer language, it's probably the better. Also, try to address the funding criteria and priorities. Each application or each stream in the guidelines has different priorities, so it's important that they're addressed in your application, because that will make it easier for the assessors to say, tick that box and say, oh yes, they deserve a grant. And submit early, don't leave it till the last minute, otherwise you might miss out. There's a lot of people that are submitting grants in the last few hours leading up to the application closing date, and those ones that are rushed are going to have a lot of difficulties. Try and get your application in at least 3 or 4 days before it's due. Now the budget's divided into 3 sections which automatically calculate your totals. So there's the cash budget, which is the money up front that you're buying things with. There's the in-kind contributions, that might be people donating services or free hall hire or something like that. And then there's the volunteer cost, which is what your organisation is putting into the project through its volunteer work. So with the budget, it's really important that the total income, the total amount of money that you're receiving, is matching the total expenditure. That way you're not making a profit and you're not going to lose money on your project. So here's an example of the budget. On the income side, you'd put Yarra grant. With the status, you'd put not confirmed or confirmed, whether you've got it or not, and the amount of money. And on the right hand side, you've got the expenditure. So it might be for food, $500, for hall hire, $1,500, etc. And so the expenditure should match the income, and they both those figures will automatically be calculated in the boxes below. Also with the income kind description, so any donations or free stuff you get, you can put in the in-kind description and the estimated value. The purpose of this is so, a project, we might be only giving $5,000 or $10,000 to a project, but the project actually is valued at a lot more than that through the in-kind contributions and the component about volunteers. So we like to get the whole picture of how much the grant is actually contributing to the community. With the applications, they'll all be assessed against the following criteria: the capacity of the applicant to deliver on projects, clearly defined aims, clearly identified target group, the alignment with stream funding priorities, as I said before, the evidence of community need. You need to just demonstrate intended outcomes and evaluation methods, community participation and consultation where appropriate, and obviously a complete and realistic budget. I can't overestimate how important that is to get that budget right, because it's often a thing that the assessors look at to show how you're going to manage your project. Also, all not-for-profit organisations are required to provide their latest financial statement with their application. This could be a copy of the statement you provide each year to Consumer Affairs. It's required to ensure that the applicant organisations are viable and able to sustain themselves for the projects they've applied for. With public liability insurance, we also require that for successful applicants, but you're not required to include it with your application. So once you get your funding agreement, we'd ask you to provide a copy of your certificate, and it doesn't have to be in your name. It could be provided by the venue where you're working, or an auspice organisation. But yeah, it's important to have that public liability insurance. Okay, once it comes to writing your grant, try to be concise. Try to write in plain English, as I said before. Don't assume that the grant assessor knows your group. So there's a section about in the application where it says describe your organisation and what it does. Try to have something on the go about that, so they've got a good idea about who you are and what you do. Also, you can have a look at what projects have received grants previously, so you can see the sort of thing that's been funded in the past and get some ideas, whether it's online or for any other reason. So if you've put in an application, I will send an email in January, hopefully, with the outcome of your application. And if you're successful, funding agreement will be attached. You'll need to return the funding agreement, and hopefully we'll do that electronically rather than by mail. You'll need to provide a copy of your public liability insurance, and if you haven't received a grant before, a copy of your organisation's bank statement showing the account number, so we can put you on the system and pay you by EFT, hopefully at the end of January or early in February. And the projects are to commence from February 2021. If you don't get a grant, call for some feedback. It's always important to know why you missed out so you don't repeat the mistake. Use it in future applications and see who else has been successful. It's important to obviously maintain relationships with the council, and I might be able to look at other avenues of funding. We have our e-newsletter that comes out monthly and provides information about opportunities other than just the ARA grants. When you do get a grant, set up an evaluation strategy, because you'll have to report on it later. So see how you can measure whether you've been successful or not in achieving the aims of your grant. And keep a track of how you're spending the money, because you'll need to report on that as well. And also publicly acknowledge the grant. So if there's any websites or pamphlets or newsletters or posters, please write in or email us and get the Yarra logo so you can put them on your advertising material or promotional material, and show that you've had the support of Yarra Council. So as I said, you need to submit an acquittal report within 2 months of the project's completion, which includes a financial report on how the funding was spent. So that's attached electronically to the Smarty Grants application, and you fill that in online. If you've got overdue applications or acquittals from previous grants overdue, you're not eligible for future funding. So it's important to get those acquittals in. Finally, the final slide. Okay, so Ellie and I run the grants program at City of Yarra, and our numbers and details are there. Any queries, give us a call or send us an email. Happy to take any queries you might have, and obviously have a look at the application guidelines which are online, and if there's anything else we can help you with, we'll let you know. Also intending on having a couple of information Q&A sessions as well, sometime later in the year when the grants are open. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.